Trump says the U.S. will end trade negotiations with Canada over their digital services tax.
Well, Mark Carney is trying his best to keep Donald Trump happy with NATO, and then he turns around and policies of the Liberal government to tax everything, to impose tariffs on digital businesses has blown up in their face. Welcome to the Canadian Shield. My name is Sterling. Well, the Liberal government has taken yet another loss to Donald Trump. And this is important for those of you out there who thought you were going to somehow punish Donald Trump. You were going to send a message to Donald Trump, all the people out there that supported Mark Carney, trying to convince yourself that he was going to be the man because he's a corporate raider. Now, I know you told yourself that he's an economist, but he isn't really. It doesn't matter what his education is. What he has done with that education is simply tried to make more money for other people with their pension funds. Hard workers, he takes their pension funds and he raids other things, and then he tells you that it's no good, like in the sense of the pipelines that he owns, while he's telling you that he doesn't want Alberta to make any more pipelines, or how he owns all of these pipelines to put gas in the car while he's telling you that you're not allowed to drive a internal combustion engine. Then he's telling you, oh, Donald Trump won't be telling us we're going to make new path roads into Europe. We're going to make new path roads into all these various countries. Meanwhile, those countries are telling Canada that they're not interested in doing business with them. Donald Trump says we want 5% from spending from NATO if you want any help from us. And NATO said, you know what? Okay, all right, 5% it is. Now I got a little bit to talk about that because I know Mark Carney made that announcement a couple of days ago, but it's important to see the overall, right? We are going to talk about how Donald Trump told Canada that the negotiations are off so long as this digital tax is running, digital services tax, which ultimately is a tariff. But I'm going to get into that. First, let's just have a look at what the announcement on the digital services tax was. And then we will talk about how Carney tried to make everybody happy with this NATO announcement, only to turn around a day later and realize that he cannot beat Donald Trump. And you as a Canadian need to understand that. You as a Canadian need to appreciate that as your inflation goes up, as your cost of living crisis comes down, crushing down all around you, the government that we have in place, keeping us from building and getting jobs, is not the one that's going to be able to solve these problems for us. Before I read to you what Donald Trump said on Truth Social, which brought the whole thing to a screeching halt, and I'm sure got the Liberal cabinet freaking out and losing their minds and doing all kinds of stuff behind the scenes and trying to convince you all that they have everything under control, when in reality they don't have any of it under control. And with every passing minute, with every passing day, the economy of this country gets closer and closer to that of the third world. I want to show you something. I want you to listen to this. I got this off Fox Business today. Exactly. They were making an announcement on this dealing with Trump in Canada, and many of the other trade deals that Trump is promising will be 19 of them. I believe he promises he'll have settled down by July 9th, which is the new cutoff for the increased tariffs. So let's just have a quick listen to what they said there.
The S&P and the NASDAQ did hit new record highs.
So you heard Fox Business announce that S&P and NASDAQ are at record highs, and even the Dow is up. That means that the economy in the United States is strong. It's booming. If the CBC will try to convince you that the economy is collapsing because there was some losses on the stock market, how come you don't hear them talking about how the economy is booming? Because they're not invested in your what's best for you. They're invested in how much they can terrify you. They're invested in how much they can trick you. That's why you don't hear the reality and the truth coming out of them about Mark Carney, the Liberal Party, and that's why you cast your vote the wrong way, because you believed in your mind somehow that the press that was telling you that it's all Donald Trump's fault was somehow doing what was right by you. And yet here we see that Donald Trump's economic policies have brought the record highs to the stock markets. A couple of months ago, they were screaming, oh no, it's all going to come down, crashing down around, because he had like 2 days in a row where it went into the red. All of those people that were into the red are now laughing into the green, and I don't hear a peep out of the far left media in Canada. I don't hear them saying, hey, Donald Trump did a good job. What's interesting is Donald Trump doesn't profess to be an economist, but he does seem to understand how money works. By contrast, Mark Carney professes to be an economist, and he doesn't seem to understand how money works at all. He certainly doesn't understand diplomacy. And that's something that you have to learn when you're a businessman like Donald Trump, as opposed to the businessman like Mark Carney, who's nothing but a corporate raider. And in the business world, corporate raiders, though they might get a lot of money, they don't get any respect because they don't have any interpersonal skills. At any minute now, you know that guy could turn around and try to raid your company. Without that kind of, you can't get a good conversation from a guy if he's got in the back of his head that any minute now you and your company are going to try to come in and shut him down. Take what is his, take what he's worked for. Donald Trump doesn't have that reputation. That's why he can be good with names and good with and gregarious and charming and all of the things that many of you and that are of the certain generation don't understand because you think everything is done with a telephone. Mark Carney was never a good choice for Canada. And here you can see more of the results of it. He promised he was going to put Donald Trump in his place on day one. Where is it? Okay, here's the truth. That don't like I believe they're called truths, not tweets. So here is that. We have just been informed that Canada, a very difficult country to trade with, including the fact that they have charged our farmers as much as 400% tariffs for years on dairy products, I'll come back to that, has just announced that they are putting a digital services tax on our American technology companies, which is a direct and blatant attack on our country. Interesting choice of words. They are obviously copying the European Union, which has done the same thing. I mean, Mark Carney wants to be a European Union member more than anything else. He lived most of his life over there and is currently under discussions with us. Also, based on this egregious tax, we are hereby terminating all discussions on trade with Canada effective immediately. We will let Canada know the tariff that they will be paying to do business with the United States within the next 7 days. Thank you for your attention on this matter. It's interesting to note that he says that the European Union is putting a tax on the American technology companies, but he's still doing business with them. He's not interested in doing business with the Liberal government, Mark Carney, especially. I mean, there's so much of Mark Carney's government that was Justin Trudeau's government. So why would Donald Trump really want to be dealing with, say, Chrystia Freeland, for example, who spoke so much, against Donald Trump so many times? I'll start with the 400% crack on the dairy. Quebec won't accept anybody else's dairy, and I believe that they put 400% on stuff coming out of Vermont and upstate New York going into Quebec rather than those regions try to import into Quebec. They have to pay a lot of money. I think it's interesting language that he says, and I'm just going to quote here, "It is a direct and blatant attack on our country," which is what you've heard the Liberal government spouting now for 6 months. How it's, sovereignty this and sovereignty that, and how Donald Trump's, unfair taxes, unjustified taxes, and all the rest of it. And here the Liberal government is putting 3% tax on any digital media company. Now, when I explain to you what that means, this is going to raise costs on every single solitary thing in the country, because the wording is such that even if you have a little Shopify, even if you're doing drop shipping, oh yeah, no, you're paying that tax. Don't you fret. Because that's what far left socialists, Marxists always do. They want to shut down any industry because that can threaten their power base. Then they say, well, that's all right. The industry that does get up and running can pay for it. But there's not a single businessman in the world, Mark Carney included, who doesn't calculate taxes as a cost. So if it goes up 3% to them, it's going up 3% to you. There's no denying that. There's no arguing that. And probably, like I say, closer to 5%. Because these companies, they like to put in a little cushion and they have a convenient little excuse to add 1% to their bottom line. Nothing wrong with that. That gives, well, in their mind, I'm saying there's nothing wrong. If we have to put it on there, we might as well do it anyway. People don't really do the math on what 1% extra is. And you ask yourself, well, how can that help the Canadian population at a time that our affordability crisis is touching every aspect of our life? And the answer to that is it cannot help them. It can only harm them. Mr. Elbows Up, he should have known that. Instead of talking a big talk, he should have looked ahead and said, how can I solve this problem without having to involve Donald Trump? Like you heard Pierre Poilievre say. What is the digital services tax, you might be asking? Well, it's a tax that the Liberal government is putting on anybody that's doing business in Canada online. So if you're not now, initially you want to be thinking Disney, you want to think Amazon television like Prime, you want to think Netflix, but it's bigger than that. It's broader than that. It's everything that comes into the country via the internet. So if you are going on Facebook and your information is being sold to somebody at a profit, that gets taxed. If you're going on to, like, advertising is taxed, and if you buy something off of a person, like go on their YouTube page and buy something off of the bottom of it, that's being taxed. There's a whole formula mathematics for it that I have a shot of that I'll break it down for you a lot easier, but I'll just give you an overview. I got this directly from the bill. I'll leave a link to the bill. The overview: these legislative proposals would implement the Digital Services Tax Act. The act would impose a tax of 3% on revenue derived by residents and non-residents of Canada from certain digital services they provide. The targeted revenues are generally those that arise in connection with digital service providers' engagement with online users in Canada. These revenues include certain revenue related to online marketplaces, online target advertising, social media platforms, and the sale or licensing of user data. This tax is aimed at businesses that meet certain revenue thresholds. The tax will apply on a calendar year basis. Now, that's really important, that last line, because they're retroactively trying to impose this tax when it was put on during Biden's administration. So I believe they're going all the way back to 2022. Now, I appreciate that if this applies to every sale Amazon has made inside of Canada online, or if this applies to anything, any ad you saw running on Facebook, or any ad you saw running on, I don't know, whatever platform you like to listen to, whatever platform you like to look at, whatever platform you like to read, Instagram, for example, or if you've gone online to buy somebody's T-shirt off of whatever social media that you like to, not social media, excuse me, whatever influencer that you like to watch. Well, you've got to pay for that. If you're paying, and when I say you, I mean the company, right? So they can't go ahead and charge you that 3% back. They're running a tab over the course of 3 years. They want it all up front. Can you imagine how much money that is in the case of Netflix, or in the case of Walmart online, or in the case of some poor person who's only selling T-shirts and just doing a drop ship, and now all of a sudden they are going to get hit with a bill for an additional. So you're sitting in your living room trying to make a little bit of extra money for your family, and you have T-shirts and hats and whatever running on the bottom of your YouTube channel, for example. Now every sale that you've made over the last 3 years, you've got to kick up an additional 3%. I mean, that's just ridiculous. So you can see how the Liberal government doesn't understand what they're doing when it comes to the economy. They, like all socialists, are just desperate to have more money, right? Margaret Thatcher said it best: socialism works fine until you run out of other people's money, and they have run out of other people's money. We're running close to $100 billion deficit this year. Can you imagine? It's going to take a long time to pay back when we have no economy. Who's coming for that money? What did they get to take? Did they all of a sudden get to come in and say, you know what, it doesn't matter. You've gone broke, so we're taking all the diamonds, all the oil. I mean, what is it? What does Mark Carney put up as surety for this enormous bill that he's running? In the bill, they have a definition of online marketplace, which I think you can all understand what it is, but let's read it nonetheless. The definition online marketplace provides that an online marketplace has 3 elements: a digital interface. I mean, that's everything. Everything online has an interface. It allows users to interact with other users. I mean, that could just be you leaning out the window. It facilitates the supply of property or services, including digital content, between those users. So that's your television. That's your interacting with people, going live streaming. That's your Twitch. That's your any of them at all. What we're discussing right there. So it's not just about the online retailers. It's not just about the merchandisers. It's not just about the magazines. It's everything. First, they tell you that we have to get a digital world. We have to put everything together on the internet and everything of that nature. And now they tell you that everything that you do online is going to be a 3% surcharge on top of that. For what? Well, because the Liberal government is flat broke and they're desperate, and that's all they know how to do. They would rather kill the oil industry, which could make so much money, and just tax you to death. But how do you pay for taxes if you don't have the money coming in? Wait a second. So you're telling me that if a person's sitting online and they made an earning on Twitch, they now have to kick in an additional 3%. Unless, of course, they're in a different country, then it's a certain other percentage. They have a formula for it, which I'm telling you right now is just the most absurd. And it was such a money grab coming out of these guys. I don't blame Donald Trump and the American companies for being upset about this. And I don't think that the Liberal government has any idea just how much impact this is going to have on the lives of the little people. Because it's funny how they won't allow little people to be protected under C11 or C18, but they will tax them, no problem at all. Right? They won't extend protection to them, but they will take every penny they can get their hands on. And that's the kind of government that Canada is dealing with. And that's the kind of government that if you voted for the Liberal government or you voted against Donald Trump, that's what you voted for. You voted for a government that will not protect individuals like myself, but will come after me for tax revenues. They will say, I'm not allowed, I can turn you down on the YouTube. However, if you made $1, I want 3 cents of it. Okay, so I have an example of the formulas they're going to be using. An online marketplace facilitated 3 supplies during a calendar year and earned a commission fee of $2 from each supply. For supply 1, both the supplier and the purchaser were located outside of Canada. And if you look down, you can see supply 1 there, $2 times 0 divided by 2 equals 0 because everything times multiplied by 0 is 0. For supply 2, only the purchaser was located in Canada. So that means that, if you sent away to China, China is not getting taxed, just you are. Supply number 2 is $2 times 1 divided by 2 equals $1 in tax. So if you made $2, right, you got to give them $1. For supply 3, both the supplier and the retailer are both the supplier and the purchaser are located in Canada. The formula is D times E divided by 2 is applied to each supply as follows. So if you are in Canada, you have to pay supply 2 and supply 3 because you can see there down at the bottom. Variable B is the total of all amounts resulting from the application of D times E divided by 2. That is to say 0, which we get from supply 1, $1, which we get from supply 2, $2 we get from supply 3 equals $3. So you can't all of a sudden move to the United States and say, no, I'm going to go ahead and only deal businesses this way. They want every nickel they can get their hands on. They don't care how much it costs you. And you are looking around thinking in your mind, well, no wonder people are calling up Donald Trump saying, hey, wait a second. I mean, these are some wealthy people. Think about Apple Marketplace, Google Marketplace. How many times have you paid 99 cents for a song? How many times have you paid $1.99 for an app? All of that counts. How much money do they want from Amazon for all of the times that you've gone shopping and they had to pull the supplies up from the United States instead of having it directly into Canada? How much food have you ordered from online? Clothing from India, clothing from China, products from China, Temu. The list is long. But let's think about the lady who made her stuff in the garage and has been selling it off of her Instagram. That's all being taxed an additional 3%. Now, you can say to yourself, a corporation, maybe they can pick up the tab, maybe they cannot, but most people are living paycheck to paycheck, especially inside of Canada. So to think that they just kept 3% kicking around in the bank, come on. Then they'll say, oh, well, you owe us for 3 calendar years of taxes. Here's the interest that we're going to be applying to that debt, and good luck getting a tax return for the next 10 years. This is ridiculous. Now, before I explain to you just how bad Mark Carney's position is and the Liberal Party is, then let's talk a little bit about the NATO announcement that he made and how all of a sudden Donald Trump says, I want 5% under NATO. All of Europeans, NATO decided they were going to meet that 5% except for Spain. And Canada has all of a sudden said, no, we're going to do it too. And everybody's like, how are we going to pay for this? Well, with the same way that they always have been doing it. Stall tactics and creative accounting. Well, not creative accounting, creative wording of the accounting, and stalling, which I suppose is just another form of creative wording. Oh man, who votes for these people? Honestly.
5% number. 1.5% of that 5% is what's called a defense industrial pledge. And as I described very briefly in my remarks, it's much more detail in the public documents, and we can go into more detail. In fact, the Minister of National Defense can go into an exhaustive detail here, but that the industrial element of that, much of this we are already doing. This is about building the resilience. What do we do to build the resilience of the country? How much are we spending on our ports, on our transportation infrastructure? How much are we spending in order to develop our critical minerals? What do we do to make sure we have a resilient telecommunications system?
Oh man, so much gaslighting. So what he said there was the 1.5% of the 5%, right? So it's a 5% of GDP towards going to the military. Now inside of that 5%, 1.5% of that is applicable to infrastructure and all of the things that go along with defense, right? So if our ports are in good shape, so if there's ever an invasion, we have good ports, or if there is ever an invasion, we have a good road network to move these non-existent military men all around. If we give the little bit of money to Bell, we can say we've invested in infrastructure. If we build a magnetic levitation to the north so they can put in that new base for the Rangers up there, that can all go towards this 1.5%. So it's administrative costs, essentially. It's not armaments or uniforms or boots or any kind of stuff like that. It's just simply infrastructure, essentially, that all can be utilized in either defense or offense, depending on which side of the coin you want to be coming at. But from the NATO perspective, we'll call it defense.
The question is, as we move towards later in this decade, and depending on how the threat environment evolves globally, if we are moving to the higher and higher levels of defense spending because that's necessary, then we will have to make considerations about what less the federal government can do in certain cases and how we're going to pay for it. Those trade-offs happen towards the end of the decade into the next decade. And we will be much, much better informed.
And there you see it, just more stalling. Well, we'll see what happens at the end of the decade. We'll find out if there's still a threat assessment. We'll find out, meaning that he can go back to NATO and say, oh no, everything is peaceful on Earth all of a sudden for the first time in the history of humanity. And, we don't need to actually hit 5%, but right now he has to save 5% because he's trying to keep Donald Trump happy. And he wants everybody to think that he's going to be doing something to make this Canada strong and united. There are plenty of examples I could give you about countries that have armies that are not united countries. Those are never good places to live. Donald Trump, however, needs to be placated. So Mark Carney went to NATO, didn't put up a single fuss like Spain did, and just said, yeah, I'm going to do it. I'm going to meet 2% by the end of the year. And by the end of the decade, I'm going to be at 5%. Then he comes back to Canada and says, listen, it's just a little bit of creative accounting. Don't worry about it. Just, don't pay attention. Don't look it over here. Look over there. Do anything else. Don't bother me, because right now I don't want anybody to know that I'm actually just feeding everybody a whole bunch of malarkey in an effort to make them stall and not make myself look so bad. So then we come to this trade agreement. What choice does he have? He has to turn that down to zero. If he wants Donald Trump to sit at the table, he has to turn that digital services tax down to zero like he did with the carbon tax, because he can't have it repealed because Parliament isn't sitting, because Mark Carney took a vacation after 3 weeks of exhaustiveness of being the prime minister. He needed another trip to Europe, obviously. This is an interesting perspective, though, isn't it? Because if he backs down from Donald Trump yet again, we can all say for sure there's no elbows up. If he doesn't back down from Donald Trump, we can all say for sure that the economy is going to be way worse than it already is. So there's no way in the world that he can solve the problem. No matter which way he cuts it, he either has to sell out all of his scruples, he's going to have to lie to you about it, and then he's going to try and hammer, and still from such a position of weak negotiation where I've already capitulated on everything you wanted for on the G7. I've already capitulated on everything you asked me for NATO, and now I'm capitulating on everything you asked me for on the digital services tax. Yet somehow you think I'm going to come in the room and hammer out a sharp deal on trade. Oh, come on, guys. He'll be kneeling at the chair of Donald Trump. It'll just be yes, sir, no, sir, whatever you say, sir. Obviously. And that was never ever going to be anything different. That's what was always going to happen. I told you all of that. The way to solve this problem was to vote for Pierre Poilievre, because then at least we could be working inside of the country. We would be at least generating some economy. We have so many of our industries right now taking bailouts from the government because they're holding their breath thinking that Mark Carney is going to somehow be able to make trade come back to the way it was in the year 2015. But it's not ever going back to that. The American population, I told you at the beginning, right? The NASDAQ is up. Everybody is making a lot of money down there, and they are not interested in what other countries have to say. They are not interested in those jobs leaving the country, not even in the smallest way. They will vote for the money, which is what we as Canadians should have done. We should have voted for the economy, not for the ideology, because the ideology is making us all poor. The ideology is making us all hungry. The ideology is allowing crime to go through the roof. The ideology is allowing for all of these problems that plague the Canadian population. It's not just one or two, it's 10 or 12 guys. And Mark Carney is their ringleader. He's never going to try to solve these problems. If we'd have had somebody at the helm who was willing to put shovels in the ground, at least we could be saying, okay, well, we can't trade there, but we can at least start to have an economy going between Alberta and Manitoba or PEI, and we can have these jobs happening, and we could be putting them in the ground, not these grandiose, I'm going to make 1 million houses tomorrow. The small stuff, the little things, the little stuff is how we keep the economy going. The small things is how we get it up and running. You don't jump in, and that's how we begin, and that's how you rebuild an economy that's so devastated like Canada's. That is exactly how they would apply it if it was a country that they were trying to save with the World Monetary Fund. They would come in and they would get things started locally. They'd be like, oh, no, we're going to have these people start a farm. And then over here, we're going to have them starting a farm. And we're going to teach the women how to do this. And we're going to teach the men how to do that. And we're going to get the children off to school. And we're going to rebuild this economy. Just give us 5 years and we'll have a look. Of course, we can't get started on that in Canada. And Donald Trump has just made the Prime Minister of Canada look like a fool, who talks out both sides of his face and who is going to capitulate across the board 100%. He's going to do whatever Donald Trump tells him to do, because the alternative is a collapse of the Canadian system, which will then remove him from the job that he currently possesses. And that, as I've told you, bothers him more than anything. His ego is going to be the thing that we have to be talking about. All right, you let me know what you think down in the comments. Do you think that he will stand up to Donald Trump, or do you think that he'll bend right over? I'm going to wrap here. I want to thank you for listening. I'll talk to you next time.